Old school design is one of the many reasons for my preference of indie video games over that of the AAA side of the industry. Thanks to this, we have seen the revitalization of genres that were thought to be forgotten, such as the dungeon crawler, roguelike, turn-based RPGs, and more. Now more than ever, we're seeing retro game design coming back, and the game we're looking at today is one such game. Warbanners is a turn-based strategy game developed and published by Crasleen Games, and released October 18th, 2017. Warbanners combines the classic turn-based strategy gameplay with an action points system similar to that of the old Fallout games, while also adding in a few modern twists along the way. It's a great game for the most part, but its difficulty even in the easier setting makes it a game that is unsuitable for those unfamiliar with its mechanics. You take on the role of Roderick, the leader of a band of mercenaries called the Silver Griffins. His journey begins at a small village tavern that comes under attack by a band of orcs. After successfully defeating the orcs, the mercs head on their way looking for whatever work they can find. The main goal of the game is for the Silver Griffins to become legendary mercenaries, but there are subplots to the game also. On their journey, the Griffins get dragged into all forms of conflicts, including a battle between dwarves and elves and a war between the king and the orcs. The plot and the numerous subplots aren't that original. While that is the case, they are very well written and certainly show that storytelling is one of the strong points of the developer. It is well paced and contains many moments where you will need to make choices that don't impact the plot itself, but do have consequences on how scenarios play out. An example of this is early in the game, you get a choice between 3 quests, 1 main quest and 2 side quests. If you ignore the side quests, you will meet an old friend of Roderick's whom you must escort to the town to the north, which will lead to a confrontation with orcs. If you complete any or both the side quests before the main one, Roderick's friend will have already left, resulting in the caravan and his friend being ambushed and killed. Some decisions made throughout the campaign will lead to various outcomes, which can affect your karma either negatively or positively, that ultimately decides what kind of mercenary you are, that being good, evil, or anything in between. Your karma levels can also affect various aspects of the gameplay, such as unlocking units and the likes. Overall, yes, the plot is somewhat cliché in some regards, but the decisions made throughout the game do liven it up and stop it from becoming stale. It is just a shame that some of the decisions made don't seem to affect the actual plot, as that would have really made things interesting. But let's not get nitpicky for no good reason. At the end of the day, the plot and its subplots are enjoyable and do a great job of keeping you hooked to the game, even if it isn't all that original. It's well paced, well written, and really has some good, even if basic character building. It is sure to please any plot-hungry strategists out there. The basics of Warbanners are very similar to that of any other turn-based strategy game. You take a turn moving your units and attacking, and then the enemy takes a turn moving their units and attacking yours. Each unit has action points that work in similar fashion to the old Fallout games. You move your units on a hexagon grid using 1 action point per hexagon, and attacking takes up additional action points depending on the unit. Every unit type is unique with their own stats, strengths and weaknesses that affect each and every battle greatly. For example, fast units can move further each turn and are harder to hit, while bigger units deal massive damage and have a lot of health but move much slower. Ranged units can attack from a distance, magic users come in both supportive and offensive roles, and melee characters come in the forms of tanks, major DPS characters, along with some being able to attack multiple enemies at once, and attacking from behind cover or another unit. Just saying all this out may not sound complicated, but actually putting everything into action is a whole different story. As if that isn't enough to take in, the environment also greatly affects how the battle is played out. Such environmental effects include light, darkness, height and more. For example, if in fog or darkness, units will be less accurate, but if the area is lit up, accuracy is once again increased. Units who are above ground level will gain increased accuracy when shooting at enemies below, and units on the ground level will get a decrease in accuracy when targeting those above it. Also with melee combat, depending on where your unit is facing when attacking an enemy, can vary how accurate they are. For example, if facing the enemy directly, they may only have about a 50% chance to hit, but attack from the back and you'll have something along the lines of 75 to 80%. Between the unit's strength and weaknesses and the environmental effects, there is a ton of strategic elements to take into consideration as you play Warbanners. They really do add a whole level of depth to the strategy and keep you on your toes as you progress through a battle and move your units, taking advantage in every possible way. You will need to, as the enemy too will use every little bonus they can get. So yes, there is a whole lot of complexity to the combat, but we haven't even touched on the RPG elements of the game yet, which too furthers that depth. All units that are active in your group during battle gain experience. When they gain enough experience, they will gain a level. Upon leveling up, you get to choose one of 3 options in stat gains, which include health, strength, evasion, stamina and more. At level 5 you gain an option to give a unit a new ability or perk should you wish to do so. Perks give the unit extra bonuses, sometimes under specific circumstances. An example of this would be fire arrows for archers, where they gain extra damage when adjacent to fire. Choosing the right level up options and using a unit's perk in every possible way really helps in battle, and can turn the tide of what would otherwise be a challenging, if not certain death scenario. If a unit dies during battle, you can resurrect them afterwards for a price. When resurrecting a unit, they will lose 1 health, 1 stamina and 1 morale, along with costing gold, with the price increasing depending on the unit's level. Deciding whether or not to keep a unit is crucial, as gold is always in short supply, so keeping units alive and deciding when to resurrect one or not can really make a big impact on the overall campaign, adding yet another tactical element to the game. Between missions you can also buy potions that can be used in combat, including stink bombs, stun bombs, health potions and more. There are also assistants that can be hired to give you additional bonuses, along with the abilities to use at the start of each mission to give you an extra advantage. Managing your goal between items, unit recruitment, resurrections, assistants and world events throughout the campaign is essential, as if poorly managed it can lead you to getting into trouble and being forced to start the campaign over. Warbanners is one of the most complex and in-depth games I've played in years. There's just so much strategic elements that must be utilised if you are to be victorious. It is a game that really reminds me of being a kid growing up playing video games that were genuinely complex and challenging. This isn't a game for the casual strategist. It is designed to challenge you in every possible way, where you will need to use every strategic advantage that you have, or have it used against you. There's quite the learning curve to it, and you might even have to restart a few times before coming to grips with it, but once you do, it is a riveting experience. There are 4 difficulty settings to choose from in Warbanners, that being easy, medium, hard and nightmare. It is designed to give everyone a chance to be able to play the game no matter their skill levels, but how it is intentionally designed and how it actually turns out is a different story. Easy mode offers less enemies and additional gold gains for each mission, but that doesn't mean it is exactly much easier. The enemies are still equally as tough no matter the difficulty level. All the easy difficulty does is give you more wiggle room when it comes to money management, and maybe 1 or 2 less enemies in a battle depending on its scale. This ends up making even normal difficulty and easy to a lesser extent difficult for those who love strategy games but aren't necessarily very good at them. Indeed, it is very possible to play the game on all difficulties, but expect to have to replay plenty of missions the higher you play the game on. While they are neither negative nor necessarily positive things, it is worth pointing out the visuals and animations of Warbanners, as it can be a real deal breaker for some players. The visuals are very old school to say the least. While that is the case, it does work, but not for everyone. The character models do have animations, but only to the most minor degree. You will see characters face different directions and they do move around the maps, but do so looking like they are being pulled along on roller skates, and projectiles do also have animation. Having such basic visuals and animations isn't a deal breaker for me, but for those who have a particular fondness towards games that do, Warbanners may not be what you are looking for. In an industry where complexity is generally seen as a bad thing, it is immensely refreshing to see a game with such a huge amount of complexity and strategic elements. The gameplay is simply brilliant despite its difficulty, the plot is pretty good even if not overly original, the visuals even with their simplicity work, and the soundtrack is nothing short of pure audible pleasure throughout. It is a game that old school gamers like myself who loves complexity in video games that will get extreme amount of enjoyment out of Warbanners. I admit at first I didn't like the game, but after some patience and willingness to learn the ins and outs over time, the game became nothing short of being riveting, especially with some of the massive battle and siege scenarios you experience, and with that, I give Warbanners an 8 out of 10. It isn't perfect and it definitely doesn't attempt to reinvent the wheel, but what it does is give a turn-based strategy experience that few games can compare to. Thank you very much for watching, and until next time, have fun.